Well, it's been nearly 2 months since Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi was killed. The video of him being brutalized by rebels in his own stronghold have made the rounds on the internet and sparked debate. Now, Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin says the U.S. had direct involvement in the death of Gaddafi.
Who did this? Drones, including those of the U.S., struck his motorcade, and then commandos who were not supposed to be there called for the so-called opposition and militants by the radio, and he was killed without an investigation or trial.
Well, joining me now to talk about this, investigative journalist Wayne Madsen, who returned from Libya not too long ago. Welcome, Wayne. So first I want to ask you your reaction to Prime Minister Vladimir Putin's statement that the U.S. was directly involved in Gaddafi's death.
Well, I think the Prime Minister Putin is correct because, of course, as Prime Minister, he has access to his own intelligence that was gathered from every place, from Russian diplomats to intelligence operatives and other sources. I myself received a call the morning that Kaddafi was captured along with his son and other members of his entourage. They left Sirte after sun up. Now, the charge was they were trying to escape. If they were trying to escape Sirte, they would have left while it was still dark, under cover darkness, with headlights off, and instead they waited for sun up. At that point, when the sun came up, about 8 o'clock in the morning, at full sunrise, over Sirte, all these white flags started to appear. White flags of truce, white flags of surrender. It was quite clear that something had been worked out in advance where Gaddafi was either going to go to another location to either surrender, or a deal was worked out where he could leave for another country. We now know that there was negotiations in March of this year between Gaddafi's government and an American private security firm called Executive Action that was negotiating a deal where Gaddafi might be able to go to either Zimbabwe or South Africa. But it looks like the U.S. and the NATO, the drones that had him under surveillance, and the people, the Libyan rebels who were there with U.S. Special Forces present, violated the white truce, white flag of truce, white flag of surrender, something that's been very rarely done. The U.S. did it to the Indians during our genocide of the Native Americans. But the white flag of truce surrender has been recognized since the year 25, the Eastern Han Chinese dynasty. That is an egregious violation of the laws of war, and I think Putin is correct when he said the U.S. was directly involved in Gaddafi's brutal death, and showing scenes of the body of him and his son for days and days and days is just indicative of U.S. policy. We did it with Saddam's sons. They were being shown in a morgue, and when our forces took out Jonas Savimbi in Angola, the rebel leader, he was seen laying on a slab with about 16 bullet holes in his body. The U.S. seems to have a macabre culture of death, and you have to ask, some of the people at the CIA and Pentagon, do they bathe in human blood on a daily basis? This is just a macabre type situation with some of our leadership.
I do want to ask you, because you were recently in Libya, you were in the middle of it all, what you saw for yourself and what you heard from your sources. The Pentagon has acknowledged that drones were involved in Libya, but they are denying that there were boots on the ground. To your knowledge, what is the truth behind that?
Well, when I was in Libya, we were seeing a fresh videotape coming in from the field, from the battlefront, showing Libyan rebels uncrating brand new FN assault rifles. That's a Belgian company. These were chambered for NATO rounds. Coming out of the crates, you could clearly see these were new weapons. Where are they coming from? Obviously, NATO is in there arming these rebels. These rebels, we were told, oh, they're using old Soviet weapons from the time of during the Cold War, when the Soviet Union sold Libya a lot of weapons. We saw very few. We saw evidence of very little use of Soviet-made weaponry. This was all brand new NATO weapons being used by the rebels.
I want to ask you to reflect also on another thing Putin said there. He argues that his death went down without an investigation, without a trial. Do you think Gaddafi's death was justice served in this case?
Oh, absolutely not. You know, whether he had gone off to South Africa or Zimbabwe and he got a chance to, you know, write an article or give an interview, or even if he was in before the tribunal in The Hague, where he had a chance to give his side of the story, I think a lot of Western powers would have been very embarrassed by what Colonel Gaddafi would have had to say about his past relationship with the CIA, for example, which helped engineer his coup in 1969 to overthrow the senile old king, King Idris. Now Idris's family thinks they have some right to take over Libya again as in some sort of a renewed monarchy. But clearly, people like Gaddafi and Tariq Aziz, a former Iraqi deputy prime minister under Saddam Hussein, who's now, the Iraqi government says they're going to execute him. People like Manuel Noriega, who's you know, pushing 80, he's in a prison in Panama. These people who have done these deals with the United States know too much, and you see what happens to them. They're either killed or they're put in prison and they throw the key away. And
after the death of Gaddafi, the brutal death of Gaddafi, images of it were all over television screens, all over the internet. Having been there and witnessed what it's like there firsthand, what was your reaction to seeing these images? Oh,
it was appalling. I was actually in Tripoli for the 40th anniversary of the Libyan Revolution in 2009. I was in Gaddafi's tent in the compound, which came under incessant bombing during the NATO bombing campaign. I mean, Gaddafi was well respected in Africa. He had a lot of plans which may have come up right against some plans by the British, French, and U.S. for Africa. He wanted to create an African currency unit and stop trading with, you know, based on the dollar and the euro. He was a great promoter of development in some African countries. He invited a lot of guest workers from Africa into Libya to work, from the poorest countries, Niger, Burkina Faso, Guinea. They could all come to Libya, make a decent wage, and unfortunately the rebels, who are largely Berbers, who are racist, you know, many of them are racist, targeted these African workers as so-called mercenaries, and this was put out by the corporate media here, that Gaddafi went and hired a bunch of mercenaries. He did not. These were guest workers who were laid upon by the rebels. They were brutally killed. Their wives and daughters were raped. And this is the legacy of the so-called Libyan rebels. When the history books are written without the interference of the propagandists, this is what the story is going to tell.
And this story, we're not hearing a lot about it in the mainstream media. Do you think it's important to keep this story alive and for these kinds of details to come out?
Yeah, well, I think it is, because what we see is the United States engaged and its allies engaged in these blood sports. They foment these rebellions in these countries, and then they have these external forces come in. In Libya, it was the Salafists, many of them backed by Qatar and Saudi Arabia, the most extreme Islamic people you can find. This is the legacy. The same blueprint is now being used in Syria, and as we know from Senator McCain's comments, they have plans to maybe use these in Russia. He was quite open about the fact that he hopes that Prime Minister Putin goes the way of Gaddafi. Incredible coming from a U.S. Senator.
Wayne, thank you so much for giving your insight on all of this. That was Wayne Madison, investigative journalist.